Hello, my name is Brian Keith, speaker, mentor, coach, and I might be a prophet. Welcome to episode number 180 of the Dime Devotional Daily Inspiration, Motivation, and Exhortation. I am dropping dimes at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Check out the blog. I might be a prophet.com, but also check out the website. The website is pretty good too, briankey360.com, to catch up on all the dime devotionals you may have missed. Tonight's a good one. I think they're all good. I'm a little bit biased, but tonight's a real good one. So let's just get right into it. This is coming from episode number 180, episode number 180, and it's entitled, Whose Report Will You Believe? Whose report will you believe? If I didn't tell you, I'm dropping dimes at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, but let's get right into it. In 2011, the country of Japan experienced a major natural disaster. There was an earthquake that resulted in a tsunamis hitting the coastline. Many people died and many people were displaced, and there was a great loss of property. This horrific disaster was unprecedented because of the chain of events that followed. The earthquake caused the tidal waves, and the tsunamis caused the Fukushima nuclear power plant to melt down, to add a third layer to the devastation. This is sometimes how life goes. Sometimes life goes just this way. So you go from one cataclysmic event to another major catastrophe, and then you finally find yourself in a world-shifting occurrence, and it's extremely easy to lose hope, to lose focus, to lose drive. There's a number of things that can happen in this situation. I remember this vividly. I remember the news. I remember people talking about it, and what I realized was that, later on, I didn't realize it right away. Well, let me just share what I have. I remember this vividly in the news, and I also remember the people, the heroes. This is what I remember. The heroes that made the ultimate sacrifice to contain the nuclear radiation. These heroes made the ultimate sacrifice, knowing that they would perish, but did so also knowing they would save countless lives. These are horrifying facts and a sad reality that many believe could have been avoided. Some people think it could have been avoided. Rather, the devastation may have been minimized if the wisdom of the past had been considered and heeded. The wisdom of the past. In 1896, a little over 100 years ago, in the exact same area, there was an earthquake resulting in 2 tsunamis that killed more than 22,000 people. Same scenario, right? The survivors wanted to warn the next generations, but in addition, they wanted to memorialize what had taken place. The elders wanted to avoid this great suffering that they experienced. These warnings have come to be known as the tsunami stones. They're actual stones with information carved into them. The one in Anioshi, Japan, may be the most definitive and the most famous of them all. This is the carving that's on the stone, 10 feet tall, and it says this: do not build any homes below this point. Can you imagine that? High dwellings are the peace and harmony of your descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. It seemed like it's pretty straightforward to me, but somehow, some way, the information was missed. The wisdom here is so plain, and as I said just a moment ago, straightforward. The question that comes to my mind is, and I mean no disrespect, how could anyone ignore this? It seems so straightforward. One historian suggested that most of the wisdom from the previous generations is lost after the second or the third generation. I hope you caught that. The information from the first generation is usually lost by the second and definitively lost after the third. So the information from 1, 2, and 3 generations is not carried to the fourth. It takes about 3 generations, this is a quote, for people to forget. Those who experienced the disaster themselves pass it on to their children and their grandchildren. But the memory fades. And this is coming from a professor there in Japan. His name is Dr. Imamura. Another idea is that innovation may have played a role in providing a false sense of security. Engineers built what is called seawalls to protect from the tsunamis or the waves, the tidal waves. The seawalls proved to be no match for these tsunamis. The coastline and all of the highly coveted beachfront property was destroyed or grossly uninhabitable. What is my point? Was it naive to place such confidence in a man-made assurance? Was that naive on our part? Because it happened there, but it could have happened here. And I want to prove to you that it's happening in your heart. Did the inhabitants forge or forget what happened? Did they forge the events by being careless? Did the inhabitants forget what happened? Did they ignore the wisdom of the previous generations because it seemed outdated? When I consider the earthquakes, the tidal waves, and the meltdowns in my life and in my world, am I doing the same thing? Are you doing the same thing? Have I ignored the elders? That's the question. Have you ignored the elders? The credit report said, I can afford it. The real estate report says it's a good investment. And the tourist report says I can make a lot of money. The elders warned me, on the other hand. They said, seek the high ground after an earthquake. Am I willing to listen to wise counsel or to foolish ambition? Let us consider what the elders had to say and have to say. Those who have survived what we have yet to experience. There's something about a person who's been through something that you haven't been through, and they've lived to tell the tale. So let's focus on these three things. This is what they said. This is what was carved in the tsunami stone. It says this: high dwellings are the peace and the harmony of our descendants. Number 2, remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Remember. Number 3, do not build below this point. Build. What was written on the tsunami stones has a significance for us all. Let's get right into it. First point. The first point was, high dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. What does that mean? What does that mean? Let me tell you what it means to me. It means to me that the highest of priorities will always be your peace and your harmony. Whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to accomplish, whatever your dream is, if that dream is void of peace and harmony, then that is a terrible dream. If your goal is void of peace and harmony, then that's a goal that we got to reconsider. If whatever your assignment, you believe your assignment to be is voiding or does not have any peace or harmony in it, then maybe that's not a goal. So you got to fiercely protect your peace and your harmony. What you build is not just for you. What you build is not just for you, but for the next generation. So you have to build it to last more than 30 years or 60 years or 90 years. You have to build it in a different way. So when you realize it's not just for you, it is for you, but it's not just for you. You're building for the third, fourth, the fifth generation. When you build with that in mind, you build differently. If what you're pursuing is not about your peace, if it's not about your harmony, if it's not about your legacy, the people that are coming after you, then please, please, please stop doing it. Whatever the activity is, whatever the thing is, whatever you're doing, if you're posting something online, is it about your peace? Is it about your harmony? Is it about your legacy? If it is not, then cease and desist. I'm sending you a cease and desist letter right now. Number 2, remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. That really touched me. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Remember the pain of those whose shoulders you are standing on. Remember the pain of the people. Everyone is standing on someone else's shoulders. The generation that came before us made sacrifices so that you and I can do what we're doing now. We are standing on their shoulders. Remind yourself, remember the pain of those whose shoulders you stood on. It doesn't make any sense to repeat the same mistakes that we could learn from in the generations before us. That doesn't make sense to repeat those same mistakes. Tsunamis will come in your life. Be prepared. What is a tsunami? A tsunami is a tidal wave. What is a tidal wave? A tidal wave is a flood. It can be a flood of emotions. It can be something that floods your house, your home. And I'm talking about your spiritual heart, your spiritual home. It can be something that floods everything, ruins everything that's low, so that you have to retreat up high. Oh, you got to hear what I'm saying. The tsunami is the tidal wave that comes in your life. So you have to be prepared. Prepare yourself for the tsunami so that you can be in a position to put yourself higher. You got to go higher when things are flooded. When your emotions are flooded, you got to go to a higher level of thinking, a higher level of yourself. This is not the moment, not the season to hang around your friends who complain a lot. This is not the time to watch something illicit on TV, because you are being flooded. You are being bombarded with what I call the dots, the distractions, the offenses, the threats, or the trauma threats, or the trauma triggers, and then the self-inflicted wounds. This is not the season. You got something great that you need to accomplish. This is not your time to allow yourself to be flooded with bad information, flooded with people's emotion, flooded with offense. Are you feeling what I'm saying? The tsunami will come in your life. Be prepared. The earthquakes are out of your control. The tsunami is out of your control, but the calamity is 100% in your control. Let me say it again. You can't control the earth that moves under you. You cannot control the tidal wave that's heading towards you. But what you can do is, because you know earthquakes are periodic and they are coming, tsunamis are periodic and they are coming, but the calamity is up to you. So I had to make sure I understood what calamity was, because I thought that was an interesting term, because they could have said chaos. They could have said confusion. But calamity is something else. Calamity is a state of deep distress or misery caused by major misfortune or loss. So that lets me know that the calamity is my choice. The calamity is my response to the distress. It's the response to the major loss. It's the response to the major misfortune. It's the response to the misery. So I have 100% control over the calamity if I so choose. Number 3, do not build any homes beyond this point. You got to know your breaking point. Ooh, you got to know your breaking point. I know everyone else is doing it. I know everyone else is okay. Can I tell you something? I've never been drunk or high in my life. And I'm not Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Understand, I got my fair share of dirt. But I've never been high or drunk in my life, because I have a compulsive personality. I know that I come from a long line of people who have been addicted to certain substances. So I know that if I was to dip my toe into the pool, then addiction would be something that would wrap itself around me quickly. So I can't drink. I don't drink. I don't taste the stuff. Not because I'm too good, but because I don't want to become addicted. I have an addictive personality. I have an addictive mindset. When I do things, I go all in. Can't you tell? I go all in. So if I go all in on alcohol, all in on drugs, then I'm going to be a weed head, a pothead. I'm going to be strung out on something. So I can't touch the stuff. I don't drink, I don't smoke, never been drunk, never been high in my life, not because I'm good, but because I'm bad. And I don't want to touch it, because I know if I touch it, it'll trigger something in me and I'll be addicted. I can't touch it. I can't touch the stuff. So you got to know your breaking point. All that is built is not equal. The integrity is different. Every building you see, even though it looks the same, even though the square footage is the same, even if the height is the same, you don't know what ground that building is built on. So don't build any homes beyond this point, below this point, because if you build below this point, you are in tsunami territory. You are in the territory where your house is going to be flooded. So when the elders give you information, let them know you can't build below a certain point. You can't build. If there is an environment that's not for you, you can't build. You can't pitch a tent here. You can't build here, because these are not your friends. These are not your people. This is not your tribe. So you can't pitch a tent here. This job is below you. These friends are below you. This way of thinking, this mentality, this mindset, this modality is below you. So you can't pitch a tent. You can't build a house here. It's too low. You need to go up higher if you want to build. This is only a temporary spot for you. Sacrifice the glittery thing for the guaranteed thing. You got to hear what I'm saying. Many people wanted the beautiful house on the beach. They wanted that beachfront property. Why? Because it's prime real estate. It's right by the water. It is prime real estate. It's glittery. It's gold. That's where the sun is. That's where the fun is. But the glittery thing is not the guaranteed thing. You got to make sure you don't build your house below this point, because even though you built your house on the beach and everybody is thinking how beautiful your house is, when the tsunami comes, there won't be any house for people to admire. You got to hear what I'm saying. You got to hear what I'm saying. Here are the points. I try not to do this. I try not to do this. I try not to spell it out for people, because I want it to be whatever it is in your heart and mind that it needs to be. But I felt that this was okay this time. So let me be very clear. I want to be very clear as to what I'm saying. The earthquakes in this story represent when your foundations are shifting underfoot. You have no control. You have no control of your environment. Everything that is up is now down. Everything that is down is now up. Your entire foundation is being shifted. You've gotten some information. You found out the man you thought was your dad all this time is not your father. Or you found out the child who you have raised for years and years and years, you find out it is not your baby. Or the job that you poured 30 years into, you now have a pink slip. You are now terminated from a company that you poured your heart, mind, and soul. Or the relationship, the marriage, the husband, the wife, the spouse that you poured into. Or your baby, the baby that you raised from, they don't even want to talk to you now. The baby you fed for 18 years can't stand your guts. These are earthquakes. These are earth shifting circumstances and situations. When the earth shifts, remember this: if it's not about your peace, if it's not about your harmony, if it's not about your legacy, stop doing it. Stop worrying. Stop complaining. Stop murmuring. Stop crying. You did what you can do. You've done your best. You put the best into that person, into that relationship, into that job. You did your best. If it's not about your peace, now you need to start protecting your peace, protecting your harmony, and protecting your what is your legacy going to be? What is your reputation going to be despite this loss? The tsunami. What is the tsunami? I'm so happy you asked me. The tsunami is when your emotions are flooding your mind and you can't even think straight. When the emotions of hurt, the rejection, the detachment, the abandonment, the emotions of abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, or sexual abuse, when the emotions, the traumas, the past traumas are being triggered. See, rejection is when a parent, especially someone who had care over you, who had definitive, this was a caregiver, and they reject you. That rejection stays with you. I believe David suffered from this rejection, the rejection from his father, the detachment. The detachment is when you are in a space with someone, but they have cut themselves off to you emotionally, intellectually. They are not in the same, they're in the same space, but they're not in the same place. You got to hear what I'm saying. And you know what it's like. You've had parents, you've had people who were supposed to love you, and they were there physically, but they weren't there for you emotionally. They weren't there for you intellectually. They weren't there for you and socially. They weren't there for you in so many ways. The tsunami is when it floods in and you cannot think straight because you are triggered by your trauma. This is what you got to remember. You might not be able to control the earthquake. You cannot control the tsunami, but what you can control is the calamity. You can control how you respond. You can control how you react. You can control how it makes you feel. You can't control how the emotions flooded your mind, but you can control how you respond. Oh, you got to hear what I'm saying. I also want you to recognize the nuclear meltdown. The nuclear meltdown. The nuclear meltdown is when you feel depleted of your energy and you have little to no hope. You're melting down. Your energy, the nucleus, the center of you, power plant, the power source, the place where you get your energy from. When you feel depleted of your energy from your center point and you have little to no hope. This is where you have to know your breaking point. Because what you've allowed yourself to get to a point where there is no reciprocity. You've allowed people, the leeches, the parasites, to suck so much of your life out of you. You've allowed people to suck so much of your energy from you, to suck all of who you are out of you. They've sucked they sucked your time, they've sucked your energy, they sucked your gift, they sucked all of this stuff out of you, and now here you are, depleted, anemic, spiritually anemic. You have no hope, you have no mindset, your energy is gone because you didn't know your breaking point. You got to know when to say whoa and when to say no. You got to know, hear what I'm saying, you got to know when to say no and when to say whoa. And it's better for you to accept the anger of a person that you reject on the front end than it is for you to allow them to suck the life out of you, and now you're depleted. And what's interesting is this: when they suck the blood out of you, when they suck the life out of you, when they suck the money out of you, they're going to go to the next host and suck it out of them. Hear what I'm saying? You got to stand flat-footed and recognize what is your breaking point. I hope this has made sense to you. My name is Brian Keith. I love you. I appreciate you. And I thank you so much for listening. Thank you for checking out the Dime Devotional. Have a good evening.